Hello everybody, this episode of the show is brought to you by Magic Spoon. If you're a regular viewer of my channels, I'm going to put that down. You'll know that I'm a big fan of cereal because, well, who isn't? Cereal is awesome, but it's not always good for you. There were several years where I just didn't eat cereal because, usually it's got just more sugar than you need in your life. I don't really have the healthiest diet in the world, but generally, I tend to stay in okay shape by not eating tons of unnecessary sugar as you'd normally find in cereal. Anyway, along comes a company called Magic Spoon, and they're like, "Someone, you gotta try this. There's no sugar. There's hardly any carbs, and there's 11 grams of protein." And I'm like, I heard carbs were bad. I don't really know much about them, honestly. I know protein is good, but this one, no sugar, but it tastes amazing. It's also keto-friendly, gluten-free, low-carb, GMO-free, all of that good stuff as well. Now, originally, they had 4 flavors. I was actually eating the cocoa ones today, which is one of the original 4 flavors, just because that's what I felt like. But recently, they sent me these 2. Hence, can you guys still hear me? Cinnamon, which I thought cannot be beat. That was until they introduced peanut butter flavor. And all the Americans, when I did an ad on another channel, like, "Simon, have you never had peanut butter cereal?" And I'm like, it just wasn't a thing when I was growing up in the UK. And now I've had it. I'm never going back. 0 sugar. 3 grams of net carbs, 11 grams of protein. This is Magic Spoon. It is wonderful. Get yourself a personalized cereal box with custom flavors. It's perfect. Anyway, click the link below or just go to magicspoon.com/biographics and build your own variety pack and try it out. Use my promo code Biographics. You'll get free shipping. 100% happiness guarantee. If you don't like it, money back. And let's get into the video. If you watched our video on the Somerton Man and enjoyed it, then you're in luck, as we are about to explore a similarly puzzling case involving an unidentified body and an investigation with plenty of unexpected twists and turns that sounds like they're pulled right out of an Ian Fleming novel. This one is 50 years old and comes to us from Norway. When hikers found the burnt body of a woman in the foothills outside Bergen, they did not know they were about to trigger one of the greatest mysteries in the country's history. It is known as the Isdal woman, and it has proven to be remarkably enduring, with many crime buffs, not just due to the fact that the victim remains unidentified, but because of all the circumstantial evidence that strongly suggests the possibility that she may have been a spy. Disguises, fake identities, counterfeit passports, secretive behavior, and a gory, unsolved death. This case had them all. So sit back, relax, as we take a look at the most mystifying cold case from the Cold War, the Isdal woman. Isdalen, literally Ice Valley, is a basin at the foothills of Mount Ulriken in Norway, near the city of Bergen. It is also called Death Valley by the locals because it used to be a common suicide spot hundreds of years ago, and it was also the place where some trekkers fell to their deaths during heavy fog in the 1960s. Despite its macabre reputation, it has remained a popular hiking spot. Back on November the 29th, 1970, a father and his 2 daughters decided to spend the morning crossing the Isdalen. They were hoping it would be a fun outdoor activity and a good bit of exercise, but the experience turned into something far more sinister. As they were hiking across the foothills, the trio noticed a strange burning smell. They looked around them and saw a grim sight. It was a corpse that had been set on fire. It was the body of a woman, spread across some rocks and with its arms extended forward like a boxer, a common occurrence in burn victims. Once the family got over the shock, they alerted the police, who arrived quickly on the scene and opened an investigation. First thing they noticed was that the woman did not appear to be a regular hiker. For starters, she was found off the beaten path in an out-of-the-way place that was not used for walking. The body was burnt beyond recognition, but only on the front. Her head, hair, and face were all heavily charred, but her back was mainly untouched. Police initially thought the woman might have thrown herself backward after somehow catching fire, which would explain why only her front was burned and how she ended up in a remote area. However, they could not find any trace of a campfire, so she was either burned in a different way, or another person cleaned up the scene afterwards. Despite the lack of a campfire, there were certainly plenty of other items at the scene, but they too made investigators raise their eyebrows. None of them pointed at a possible ID. There were personal effects, jewelry, a watch, some bottles, a broken umbrella, but they were all positioned in a weird way beside the body in what the forensic investigators described as some kind of ceremony. There were also lots of items of clothing, most of them partially burnt, but the strange thing was that they all had their tags cut off so they couldn't be identified. Even the bottles had their labels removed. The body was too damaged to get a good impression of what the woman used to look like. However, by jumping ahead just a bit, we can provide the description that they obtained at a later date and then sent to Interpol for some international assistance. They described the woman as being between 25 25 and 40 years old, 164 centimeters in height, weighing 56 kilograms, with slim build and brown eyes. She had broad hips, a small face, small ears, and long brownish-black hair, worn in a ponytail tied with a blue and white print ribbon. From the remains of her clothes, it is believed she was wearing a dark blue bubble nylon jacket and matching belt closing in the front with 2 interlockable rings, a green and blue check woolen shawl, a dark blue machine-knit sweater, dark blue slacks with a front zip, black jersey, long underwear, dark blue panties, blue patterned sports stockings, semi-long blue rubber boots with white soles and front lacing, brown fake fur cape. Her jewelry included steel sports wristwatch with Solo trademark, round gold filigree earrings, and a gold ring set with a large cameo. As you might have already guessed by now, none of this proved useful, as the victim still remains unidentified to this day. With no other name, she became known as the Isdal woman. Right from the very beginning, the local police from Bergen could tell that this would not be a normal investigation, so they asked for help from the country's elite police service, the National Criminal Investigation Service, or KRIPOS. The team found its first big lead just a few days after the body had been located. They had asked local tourist spots in Bergen to keep an eye out for unclaimed luggage. They then found 2 large suitcases that had been left at the luggage office of the railway station in Bergen. One of them contained a pair of sunglasses, which had a fingerprint on the lens, which was then matched to the body in the Ice Valley. There could be no doubt that the police had located the luggage of the Isdal woman. Among other things, the suitcases contained clothes, cosmetics, teaspoons, a comb and a hairbrush, a tube of eczema cream, and 5 different types of currency, but mostly German marks and Norwegian kroner. Also inside were multiple wigs and prescription eyewear that had only regular glass and no corrective lenses. Both of these would have proven useful to someone looking to disguise themselves. At this point, investigators were certain that an identification was only going to be a matter of time, but as they carefully went through the contents of the suitcases, examining them all piece by piece, their confidence was plummeting. It seemed that the same care had been shown to these items as had been to the ones found alongside the Isdal woman. Again, all identifiers had been removed: clothing tags, cosmetic labels, even the prescription sticker on the eczema cream. Somebody wanted to make certain that nobody would find out the identity of the burned woman. Even though the suitcases did not help the police identify the Isdal woman, they did provide them with 2 clues: a shopping bag and a writing pad with some notes on it. First, the shopping bag. It was labeled Oscar Rotevet's footwear store, which was located in the city of Stavanger. It was strange that somebody who had been so meticulous about removing all other brand names would leave this behind, but the police were just happy to have a solid lead. They traveled to Stavanger and talked to the owner's son, who remembered the victim as a very well-dressed, nice-looking woman with dark hair and a calm and quiet expression. First, he confirmed what everybody already expected. She was a foreigner. The woman spoke English, but with an accent, and he thought that she had an unusual scent, which he later concluded was garlic. The owner's son gave the police the first detailed description of the woman, found in the Interpol bulletin that we mentioned previously. He said that she had come in 3 weeks earlier, looking to buy a pair of boots. She took her time examining the designs close up, before settling on a pair of blue boots from the celebrity line of Askim Gummivaerfabrik. They weren't rare. In fact, they were one of the most popular models in the entire country, but crucially, they matched the burned boots found on the body, providing police with confirmation that they were talking about the same person. Then there was the other clue: the notepad. Only the first page had writing on it, which consisted of multiple series of letters and numbers. It looked like a code, and the police managed to crack a part of it after a few days of work. It wasn't anything shady, but it was strange. The code seemed to be a travel record, presumably noting all the places where the Isdal woman had traveled. Where it said 022-028P, for example, denoted a stay in Paris between October the 22nd and the 28th. It was followed by 029PS, which meant that on October the 29th she left Paris for Stavanger. Afterwards came 030BN5, which matched up to her stay in Bergen between October the 30th and November the 5th. These were eventually corroborated by other bits of evidence, but most of the note remains undeciphered, mainly because each city was only marked with a single letter, and it would be impossible to know for certain which cities these refer to. But even so, it showed Norwegian police that their victim was a well-traveled woman who moved quickly from city to city. Up until this point, their only concern seemed to be finding out the identity of the Isdal woman and what had happened to her. But increasingly, they were starting to wonder what business brought her to Bergen, especially as rumors started flying around that she may not have just been an innocent bystander. The idea that the Isdal woman was a spy was not very far-fetched. It was the middle of the Cold War after all, and espionage was a constant threat. This whole thing took place less than 3 years before the Lillehammer affair, when Israeli agents from the Mossad traveled to Norway to assassinate an innocent Moroccan waiter, mistaking him for one of the leaders of the Black September militant group that was responsible for the 1972 Summer Olympics massacre in Munich. Even though they would not admit it until decades later, Norway's military intelligence branch, the Norwegian Intelligence Service, or NIS, had launched their own investigation into the Isdal woman, but they were more concerned with finding out the reason why she visited Bergen. After all, it wasn't exactly a hotspot for international tourists back then, but there were some military tests with new rockets being performed in the area. Their reports turned out to be inconclusive. Back with the regular police, they were still trying to figure out who the Isdal woman was. They had a good description of her, thanks to the salesman at the shoe store, and the fact that she was a rare sight in Stavanger and Bergen only made her more memorable. Sure enough, after visiting a few hotels, they discovered the one she'd been staying at in Stavanger. It was the Hotel St. Svithun, located close to the shoe store. The receptionist there remembered a woman who matched the description, and a member of the cleaning staff also recalled seeing her wearing the blue boots that she had purchased from the store. This had to be the same person, and she had checked in under the name Fenella Lork from Belgium. So did the Norwegian police just identify the Isdal woman? Was the end of the case in sight? Well, of course we know that was not what happened. But in the moment, they thought their prospects were looking pretty good. First, they reached out to Interpol and Belgian police for help tracking down their victim. Then they tried to retrace her steps between Stavanger and Bergen and find out which hotel she was staying at in the latter city. This is where the case gets even more complicated. There was nobody called Fenella Lork who had checked in at any hotel in Bergen. She had used a fake name, and somewhere between Stavanger and Bergen she had changed her identity. This also meant the police were back to square one. Well, maybe not quite square one. Investigators might not have had her name, but at least they had her handwriting. Back then, all foreigners who visited Norway had to fill in an alien registration form to check into a hotel. It contains the person's name, address, passport number, and signature, which also implied that the Isdal woman had a fake passport under the name Fenella Lork. Otherwise, she would not have been able to check into the Hotel St. Svithun. Since police had the form she filled out in Stavanger, they brought in handwriting experts to compare writing samples collected from other registration forms from hotels all over the country, not just Bergen. Even in such a strange case, what they discovered still proved to be a surprise. As it turns out, the woman had stayed in multiple hotels in Norway under numerous assumed identities, which must have meant that she had access to a lot of fake passports. She also pretended to be Claudia Tielt from Brussels, Genevieve Lancier from Leuven, Vera Jar from Antwerp, Elizabeth Liedenhofer from Ostend, Claudia Nielsen from Ghent, and Alexia Zara-Merches from Ljubljana. Under these names, she had checked into hotels not just in Bergen and Stavanger, but also Oslo and Trondheim. Before her death, for example, she first stayed at Hotel Rosenkrantz for 2 days before moving to Hotel Horderheimen for another 5 days, both located in Bergen. Add to these at least one more fake name, Vera Schlossneck, which she had used in Paris, but who knows how many identities she really had. You might have noticed that most of the names came from cities in Belgium. Norwegian police thought this might be because she was an actual citizen of their country, but Belgian authorities investigated the case on their end and could find no solid leads. Unsurprisingly, all of the names she used were fake. The whole spy idea was becoming more and more plausible. At the very least, she definitely was not just a tourist who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. There had to be some kind of clear ulterior purpose to her actions, but Norwegian authorities were still struggling to discover what that could have been. After talking with the hotel staff who remembered her, police found out that the Isdal woman also spoke German, and on one occasion she had dinner in the dining hall next to a German Navy officer, although the two did not appear to interact together. Another peculiar detail was that the woman often requested a change of rooms at these hotels that she was staying at, and in one case she asked to change rooms 3 times. While the police were busy chasing down leads, the forensic pathologists were working to see what data they could obtain from the body itself. Unfortunately, the autopsy did not exactly prove to be a treasure trove of new information. It revealed that the Isdal woman had never given birth or been pregnant. It uncovered a bruise on the side of her neck, which could have come from an altercation, but it could have also resulted from a fall. The woman had been in good health, and her body showed no signs of any serious illnesses. That being said, she had suffered an excruciating death. Traces of petrol were found, which was used to set her on fire, and the presence of soot and other smoke particles in her lungs indicated that she was alive while burning. She had lethal concentrations of carbon monoxide in her blood. She had also swallowed huge amounts of sleeping pills called Phenamar prior to her death, between 50 and 70, but they did not yet have time to fully dissolve and get absorbed into her bloodstream. According to the autopsy, the Isdal woman died from carbon monoxide poisoning combined with ingesting a huge quantity of sleeping pills. Because of this, Norwegian police labeled her official cause of death as probable suicide, although many were skeptical of this conclusion. One investigator said in a recent interview that very few of them actually believed the death was suicide due to the remoteness of the location where the body was found, but even more so due to the extreme method employed. Very few people set themselves on fire as a means of suicide, and on the other hand, if she only intended to take the sleeping pills and set herself ablaze by accident, then what happened to the campfire? There were still more questions left unanswered than there were at the beginning of the investigation. However, with no more leads to pursue and an official cause of death, the case was closed in February 1971. The Isdal woman was given a Catholic funeral attended by the officers who investigated her death, and she was buried in an unmarked grave. There was one part of her that was not buried with the rest: her teeth. The Isdal woman had a lot of work done on her teeth, so investigators kept her jaw in the hopes that it might be useful in an identification. She had 14 fillings, an unusually high number for a woman her age. Most of them had pre-made gold crowns, which were unlike those used in Scandinavia at the time. Again, this clue helped prove that the Isdal woman was not a local, but that was something that everybody already knew by that point. Those types of crowns were more common in southern and central Europe, but they failed to provide a more specific localization. Ultimately, it was another dead end. The case lay dormant for decades, and it wasn't until a few years ago that new progress was made, which might eventually help us solve the mystery of the Isdal woman. Like with many other decades-old cold cases, there is always a hope that modern technology and new investigative methods might be able to yield additional information in ways that would have simply been impossible to achieve back when the crimes were originally committed. However, in this instance, the new clues also benefited from a bit of serendipity. After the case was closed in 1971, a professor of dentistry named Giselle Bang kept the Isdal woman's jaw in the hopes that somebody else might one day recognize their handiwork. He sent images to countless colleagues, had them published in dentistry journals, but it all proved fruitless as nobody came forward. Eventually, the professor died, and everybody assumed that the jaw had been discarded. According to his successor, the records mentioned that the bone had been thrown away because it had started to smell. We fast forward now to 2017, when journalists from NRK, Norway's public broadcasting company, were working on a new investigation into the Isdal woman. A bit of research on their part revealed that the jaw had not been destroyed, but rather preserved in the archives of Haukeland University Hospital. This provided investigators with the opportunity to re-examine the evidence with new technology, and soon enough, they hailed a major breakthrough. Researchers at the University of Bergen did an isotope analysis on the teeth in order to establish what they called a chemical signature. This was originally created when the teeth were first formed, and it was altered along the way by which compounds were absorbed at specific stages of teeth development. It was the first time that this technique was employed by Norwegian police, but it paid dividends as it narrowed down the place of origin for the unidentified woman. Tentatively, scientists believe that she might have been born in the area around the city of Nuremberg in Germany and then relocated further west before her teenage years, somewhere in the border area between Germany, France, Belgium, and Luxembourg. Her age was also revised thanks to the bone analysis. Previously, there was only a vague approximation to go on which said that the Isdal woman was between 25 and 40 years old at the time of her death. This new estimate placed her age at the higher end of that scale, saying that she was around 40 years old when she died, give or take 4 years. There is also another tool to consider: genetic genealogy. This is the current darling of the forensic world after helping put to bed multiple high-profile cold cases in recent years, especially that of the infamous Golden State Killer. There is hope that it might be able to do the same with the Isdal woman. Scientists have been able to create her DNA profile, while isotope analysis of her tooth enamel revealed that she was born sometime around 1930, probably near or in Nuremberg, and later she moved closer to the western border. It's not exactly a slam dunk, but it is the first solid lead in almost 5 decades, and a good enough reason to believe that this is one mystery that might be solved in the years to come. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to check out our fantastic sponsor, Magic Spoon. There is a link below, and thank you for watching.